Hey everybody, I can't express to you enough how insanely excited I am at how well these videos are doing. I thought I wouldn't even pass 100 views for at least another month, but the support just keeps coming and the channel keeps growing. Thank you so much for motivating me to keep moving forward, and anyways, without further ado, remember that I love you, and enjoy the video. Number 1. I've worked security on and off for several years to supplement my income, so I've heard quite a few creepy stories from coworkers. Probably the most legitimate story I've heard was from a guard that was working in a closed down arena. The building is more than 100 years old, but hasn't been used since the early 2000s. The city is keeping up with basic maintenance as it waits for a buyer. There's usually one guard assigned to the building. It's a 6,000 seat arena with a huge basement and 2 additional floors that have lots of old office spaces, dressing rooms, and a separate smaller community theater type stage that's upstairs. The usual guard is going through his rounds through the building. The building itself is very interesting, as it's largely unchanged since the heydays of the 70s and 80s. The upper floors are largely dark and pretty creepy. Anyway, the guard is doing his normal rounds but feels unnaturally creeped out. It's his normal post, but something feels different today. He's feeling jumpy, but shakes it off and continues. He's a very diligent guy, so he walks every floor of the building. He's in the very top of the catwalk system above the main arena where the old spotlighting equipment was. Suddenly, he hears a loud creak behind him, like someone's walking. He spins around and sees a guy standing there. The guy is frozen mid-stride like he's been tiptoeing up behind him. Guy has an unsettling, mischievous look on his face, like he's been caught with his hand in a cookie jar. One big difference though. Dude has a giant steel pipe in his hand instead of a cookie. The guard pulls out his gun, and the guy takes off running in the opposite direction and disappears into the labyrinth of the building. The cops come and sweep the building with a canine, but don't find him. They do find that he's been playing in the dust that's on the top of the old concessions counters. He had written a bunch of bizarre helter-skelter type unsettling rhymes and drew a bunch of stick figures hanging from nooses. The speculation is that it was some crazy homeless guy that had been hiding in the building for a few days and made a game of following the guards without them knowing it. I saw the writing and stick figures still on the counters the last time I was there. Number 2. I only lasted a few months doing security at an environmental cleanup site. It was a former Cold War era Air Force radar installation thing. Everything has been razed to the ground and they were taking out contaminated soil and debris. My shift would start with me waiting around for a supervisor to pick me up and get driven 2 miles to the outpost, which was where the building materials were dumped. I was basically on tweaker watch. Previously, some tweakers got caught and took a beating from the sheriffs, so none were likely to try again. I'd spent most nights smoking cigarettes and reading from my Kindle outside. So for context, I don't think there's little green men running around, but I definitely saw things in the sky that night that I would call a UFO. Sometimes you'd see like 2 or 3 orbs buzzing around, then blinking out as fast as they came. I told my friends and they told me that I just pretty much had to quit this job. For 3 nights, they'd show for 2 seconds and then disappear. Then the motion lights would turn on, and I'd get radio to observe and report. On the 4th night, it happened, and I got radio to do a perimeter check. I radioed back that everything was clear, even though I was too scared to leave. Then it happened again, and I faked a perimeter check. And again, the 4th time, the motion lights came on, but there was no radio to check on them. I tried to radio dispatch, and it was like I was muted. I started feeling ill. I realized that I had been sweating profusely, and the trailer was just roasting. I thought I'd feel better if I cooled down and had a cigarette. I hurry through the trailer door and hop down the small steps, and it's like I get blasted with a burst of cold, dry air and dazzling light, and I ended up fainting. I wake up to the supervisor shaking my camp chair outside the trailer, calling me a bitch ass for falling asleep. I'm so disoriented and like, what the fuck just happened? I get home, take off my pants, and my knees are fucking bruised. There's no way I didn't faint. I feel physically ill and curl up on the couch. My work calls me to ask me why I wrote down 3 perimeter checks when they only asked me to do 2. I've been in this trance-like state watching TV when they called, and I basically said that I'd need some time off because the job is getting to me. I get called a bitch again, but they said to come back rested for next week. I basically shut down, and when it was time to go back, I said fuck this. I still don't know what to believe to this day. Okay, so before we carry on to stories 3, 4, and 5, you guys have to know that they are all written by the same user who, unfortunately, has deleted his account, so I can't credit them. These are really good though, so enjoy them. Number 3. In 2019, I worked for 2 different private security companies, both of them completely unarmed. I was new to the field, so I wasn't aware that I was allowed to bring my own non-lethal weapons to help defend myself. No one ever mentioned it to me, but it was what it was. Some location context. I lived in Orange County, California, and worked there and LA before getting out of private security. Locations are South Anaheim and Southeast LA. These places are not places you'd want to venture after dark as a security officer. You'll see why. This is broken up by the company I worked for. I get to this location in South Anaheim at 10 p.m. and clock in. This post is a basic patrol type thing. You patrol every hour and use the work phone to scan different points to prove you did it, log observations and things you did. The first 4 hours go by with nothing going on other than a few homeless, and we're green across the board. We're supposed to call the police if we see anything illegal and document anything out of the ordinary. Well, except in South Anaheim, technically anything could be reported. 2:30 rolls around, and we observe 2 individuals, one on a bike and the other on foot. They both pop behind the stores at the west end of the strip mall, so I call the police and explain the situation. I call my supervisor like I'm supposed to, who of course isn't answering because he works mornings, because of course he does. Police arrive. I make contact with them and point where they went. They drive over to the location and start looking around. They come back and say they must have left. Tell me to call them if they come back and then leave. 3 a.m. rolls around, and I start my scan point crawl. I see these same 2 people from across the way. Guy on the bike yells something at me and started pedaling hard in my direction. I pivot where I stand and book it into my guard shack, which was basically an abandoned restaurant. I lock the door and dive behind the counter in the back, and this time I call 911. The police were apparently right around the corner and came speeding into the parking lot. They tackle the guy on the bike, and the other one bolts. The second person hadn't moved from their original spot. The police found a 9mm fully loaded with 2 extra mags, 3 ounces of meth, and several knives. The thought of this dude reaching me still scares the absolute shit out of me, because he most likely would have just killed me for snitching. The cops basically tell me that this person has been in and out of jail since they were 13 for drugs and gang activity. Fuck this shit. Number 4. I was chilling at an aviation manufacturer post, which was my main one. This place was always quiet, but this was about the time the OC decided to try and push the homeless out and away from their cities. I forget why it happened now, but it doesn't matter. It's about 3 a.m. and I had just finished a game of CSGO with a buddy, and I had to hit my points for the hour, so I do, and nothing is out of place. I come back to the shack and I set up for another game. And when I'm doing so, the video/PA we have rigged to the security gate suddenly lights up. I'm caught off guard because no one is there until about 5 a.m. I look on the camera and see this bald dude who is absolutely shredded. For additional context, I'm about 5'5" and was about 160 pounds at the time. This dude was easily pushing 6 feet and 200 plus pounds. If this dude got in, he'd absolutely fuck me all the way up without even trying. He's banging on the gate and screaming about how the government was trying to steal his thoughts or something like that. I called the PD and kept watching this guy rant, rave, and be an absolute maniac. I'm pretty sure he had no idea if I was even in the shack or not. And he's high as a kite on meth or something. I step outside while I'm still on the phone with the police to see if they can hear him. This post has the plastic privacy things for chain link fences. You know the ones I'm talking about. He catches a glimpse of me through the privacy things and really freaks the fuck out. This absolute unit of a man jumps up and starts scaling the fence. I should mention that not only did this post have a chain link fence with the vinyl privacy blinds, but a metal one behind it that has the outward facing spikes at the top. This guy basically pushes through both security features at the top of both fences and lands on my side. Now this dude is high on meth, mad as fuck, and covered in blood. Mind you, I'm still on the phone with the police. They can hear this guy, and are listening to me yell at the top of my lungs what this guy just did. I bolt into my shack, lock the door, pin the chain under the handle without realizing that this dude has a whole ass window to break through to get to me, which is exactly what he did. Homie punches the glass out of one of the panes, grabs me, and pulls me through the window onto the ground in front of my shack. I'm now pinned by this guy. Police arrive and ram the gate open with their cruiser. Within seconds, they pull him off me and wrestle him to the ground. It took 2 tasers to subdue him and get him into the back of their car. The best part is probably what my management said to me when I called him after this all concluded.
Are you okay?
Do you need to go to the hospital? No? Fantastic. You can finish your shift off. See you tomorrow for your next shift. I quit the next day. Number 5. I worked for G4S in East LA. One of the last nights I had there, the other guard and I got caught up talking and needed to go out and hit our points. My partner stops me and says something like, "Wait, that car has been sitting there for hours and hasn't moved. Don't go outside and hit those points. We can make a report about why we didn't." I look over at the cameras, and it was a car that I'd seen a bunch of times, and always chalked it up to being one of the co-workers that had stayed late for one reason or another. It was a lot more sinister than that though. The other guard finds a note left from the day shift, and it's got a complete description of the car. License plate number and a basic description of the person driving the car. It was the same car. We both look at each other and now we're too scared to even hit our inside points because we don't want to miss anything if the guy in the car tries to do anything. I call up the night watch commander and explain our situation. The note, what we both had observed, and asked what we should do. They say don't do any more patrols, stay safe, and if this all checks out, then call the PD to have them check on the car. Which we do. I don't know if you've ever tried to call the LAPD after 3 a.m. to East LA, but you're lucky to even see a squad car roll by. Turns out this night, we got lucky that they took our call seriously. They pull up behind the car and turn the lights on them, and the car does a burnout and leads the cops on a chase. I'm not sure if it made the news or not though. 3 days later, and a memo for all guards is on the desk in front of the cameras. It basically said something like, "Do not go outside for any reason after sunset. Your safety is more important than what you're guarding. If you see this vehicle, call 911, provide the description to them, and move into the main camera room." My lead was a really good dude, and didn't give a fuck about policy when it came to stuff like this. I still have mad respect for him. Anyway, about 2:15 this car shows back up and is now parked right behind mine. The back door opens up and a masked individual gets out. My partner locks the door, I call 911, and we move into the camera room. We hear the police show up and we can hear the standoff. 3 gunshots ring out. The police use their PA and tell us that it's clear and to let them into the building, which we do. A search of their vehicle resulted in several AK variants, a few AR-15s, and a bunch of things relating to what our original theory was. They were just casing the place to knock it over. Number 6. I managed security at our local hospital in my early 20s. One night, I was covering a night shift as we were short-staffed and the DOA comes in. I head down to unlock the morgue and let the coroners in, and I get started on my paperwork. Turns out, it's a kid who got the family snowmobile out for a ride and tries to cross a highway. He got T-boned at speed and was killed instantly. I finished chatting with the coroners, and we wheeled the kid into the cooler for his autopsy the next day. I had to let the coroners out, and just as I was heading back up to my office, I remembered that I hadn't done my intake inspection, which is just basically any belongings, clothes, and jewelry on the deceased. So I go back, unlock the morgue, open the cooler, and head in. Once I get up to the kid's bag and open it, we unfortunately lock eyes. I'm sure many of you know this, but you rarely die with your eyes open. Anyway, that's not the creepy part. I'm looking over this poor kid, noting what I see, and I look at his eyes again. I'm not writing anything down, and I'm just thinking about how this poor kid doesn't get to grow up. The radio on my hip makes a sound that I've never heard before. The loudest squawk. It definitely reset my heart. I radioed dispatch to see if they were looking for me, and that's a negative. No one else heard it. I zip up the bag and got out of there. I tried to chalk it up to poor reception in the morgue cooler, but I can't help but think it was him. Was the poor kid trying to get through to me? Did he have something to say? I'll never know, and I don't know if I want to find out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have a few more projects lined up, but if you'd like to give me some of your own personal stories to have them narrated on here, I could possibly turn them into a subscriber stories video. Anyways, as always, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did making it. Remember that I love you, and stay safe. That's 2 stories. Should I cut one? Nah, don't be lazy. I can do this. I needed to go out and hit our posts. Points. Post is the main thing, right? I look over at the cameras, and it was a car that I'd seen a bunch of times, and just chalked it up to being one of the workers staying late for one I managed security at our local hospital in my early 20s. Hello. Okay, stop hurrying.